how do I apply my skill set and knowledge base in other sectors or disciplines within the local and global economy?
I think that dance and art on the whole provides a great opportunity to cope with stress. Music makes the world go round.
To me, art is an expression of the creative mind.
Ballet is my passion.
It helps us to give more admiration to the world around us.
Music is from God.
God, the ultimate artist.
Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are. Today, I have, for the first time, a co-host. She has been on a previous episode, and alas, she has returned. She is Artistic Director of ElleInfiniTT and a professor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago in Contemporary Dance. Welcome back, LaShaun Prescott.
Hi, good evening, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here.
And today we have, coming all the way originally from Uganda, he holds a PhD in dance studies from the University of Auckland. He is a dance researcher, a dance educator, scholar, and performer. He is co-founder of Africa Speaks, and he is a lecturer at the University of Auckland, as well as Makerere University. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I give you Dr. Alfdaniels Mabingo.
Hello. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. Good morning, good evening, good night. And I'm just excited to have this conversation around dance. It's always good to dance, but it's always fulfilling to talk about dance.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So today we are talking about maintaining a dance career in the pandemic. Now, in a previous webinar, you talked about how to increase your competitiveness as a dance practitioner. And some of those points that you made, I thought were applicable to helping dance practitioners sustain their career in this pandemic. And one of the points you made were reinventing the self in relation to the trends and conditions in the local and global economy. And one of my friends who's from Peru, she actually listens to the show. So shout out to Sonia for this question. She asks, in terms of reinventing the self in relation to the trends, what, in your opinion, were some trends that emerged as a result of the pandemic? And how can a dance practitioner use one or more of these trends to transform themselves and stay current in this pandemic?
Yes, thank you very much. From my personal analysis, and I would like to really qualify that a number of these are my personal observations and personal reflections on some of these issues. So they don't represent my institutions or even the kind of contractors that I work for. A number of trends emerged because dance, I think what we need to understand first and foremost is that it has so many domains itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people who are dance educators, you have people who are dance researchers, you have people who are dance creators, choreographers, you have people who are performers, you have writers, you have historians, you have dance movement therapists. So you realize that dance is so complex. It's not really about dancing on stage and then you go back home. And so during the pandemic, a number of people work in these different domains operated or changed their modus operandi or differently depending on the unique characteristics of the particular subdiscipline within dance. I'll tell you, for example, as someone who is a dance educator, university lecturer, and a teacher, before the pandemic, I didn't know that I would ever teach online.
Yeah.
Especially the dances that we do. And by that, I mean the dances from from cultures, different cultures in Africa. And I think by and large, the Black diasporas, we understand. Because our dances, you have the live drumming, you have singing, which is also live, and then you have the movement. And which movement actually also really happens within the particular energy and character of the day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we approach our teaching, some of us, okay, in face-to-face teaching. And so that didn't happen during the pandemic. So we had to reorient our kind of thinking to figure out how do you, as a teacher of dances from African cultures or even Black diaspora, adapt that material, adapt the philosophy and the thinking, and that this is very important, the thinking behind this dance, these dances around this online Zoom thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I was actually just going to ask if it was Zoom, if Zoom was the platform that you would usually use, because I know some people have been using Instagram Live, some people use Facebook groups. So is it Zoom that you use?
Yeah, because of the nature of my work, so I operate more or less in within institutions.
But how has when I teach usually on Zoom, I usually use the share audio feature so that the audio comes across clearer. But you said you usually use live drumming and singing. How does it do you have any issues that would happen because of the live?
I think on my side as a teacher, like because you're there, you play and then you move. But because of latency, the students really get that drumming at different times.
Right.
Because the internet speed where each student is different. So you realize that you do drumming to give them more like an experience, but not as really something that they can respond to in real time, which we normally do in our face-to-face classes. So for me, it really pivoted from this thing of being, okay, the drumming is my co-teacher, to more or less, let me show them the experience, and then they get a feeling of what happens. And then I just, dash back and, teach the movement or use a recording that I, prepared for the class. So that kind of intersection, the one that we normally do in a face-to-face, in our actual real cultural experience, was not really happening on Zoom. Those are some of the limits.
Yeah.
Although I tried as much as possible to reinvent myself and reinvent my thinking as a teacher, but most importantly, within this idea of reinvention, I discovered a number of things teaching on Zoom that I hadn't discovered teaching face-to-face, especially pertaining our dances, indigenous dances. Number one, face-to-face was always about creating an experience. For me, that's very important. It's not about the body. It's not about, precision and the lines and the alignment. That's not how we do our art. Our art has this idea of holism, okay? It looks at a holistic person. So it feeds the soul, it feeds the mind, it feeds the cognitive, it feeds the body, it feeds the community and the collective energy, right? But then I discovered something on Zoom that sometimes it's good to go into detail. I don't know whether that is good for the dancers, to be very honest with you, but as a teacher, it's something that I'm learning, and I think I'll take it into the studio. Just going into the movement so that the people get the real experience. Because I realized on Zoom that it's important to look at only 4 movements in a class of 1 hour, and you go deep than to move from one movement to another, which I normally do in a face-to-face because it's more about the experience and the stories behind the movement. So you can have it and then move on to another one. So it's just about even reinventing our philosophies as teachers, but just expanding beyond just teaching. I've seen dancers in my country collaborate online in the pandemic. A lot of collaborations happened. I've seen dancers who were staging performances online and growing this kind of global international followers. And also another trend of dancers feeding into the new framework of commodifying products, where you go on YouTube, for example, and then you do your stuff. And then the more followers you accumulate, then you sell them to YouTube and YouTube pays you. So YouTube pays you for the views. So you have to generate content that keeps people on their toes, that keeps your followers, just growing. And the more you grow your followers or your views or whatever you want, subscribers, then YouTube uses your platform for advertisement. And I think it even happens on other platforms. And then you just sell that. So I'm seeing that model actually in a few years becoming more or less the mainstream.
Right.
The YouTube model and selling, I think with dancers, they get a lot of problems with the copyright issues. But I imagine if you're using live drumming and singing, you would not have those issues because it's like original music that you'd be uploading onto the YouTube.
Yeah. And I think that's where dancers need to be a little more creative, because that kind of reinventing the self means also reinventing, how you align and how you organize your material and how you understand, how systems work. And so I think we'll be able to even reinvent more, to have capacity to utilize those different platforms that have such limits.
So another point that I was focusing on that you made was embracing transdisciplinarity, how dance functions in relation to other sectors and fields. And as dance practitioners, we want to make connections across disciplines to create more opportunities. So I was wondering, are there any current fields or sectors in particular that you believe would be the most beneficial to foster such collaborations?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It really touches on a research project that I conducted at the University of Auckland, 2018 into 2019. So I did a research with a school of software engineering. What we are doing with software engineers, the students and staff, was to teach or to foster the spirit of collaboration.
Right.
And we are using some of the ideas that we have in dance, when we are choreographing, we work in teams in dance in most cases when we are teaching. So we draw on creative processes in dance and ideas in dance pedagogy. And then we took that kind of material, that package to software engineers, because within that field of software engineering and engineering in general, one of the things from the research that was conducted was that the employers emphasized that the number one quality that they needed to hire someone is collaboration and having ability to work in teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going in to really equip these students and lecturers with that skill. And it was a successful project. They thought we were going to teach them how to dance, but actually we just drew on ideas that we use in dance to show them the importance of collaboration, how to collaborate, how collaboration is different from cooperation, and so on and so forth. So we really touched on very important issues, and the feedback that we got from the students was like, we need to do more of this. So we are in the process of rolling out a badge, more or less like a certificate course that we want to roll across the universities in the country and schools in the country, so that we can train teachers on how they can train or teach their students the skill of collaboration. And we are drawing on ideas and processes that we use in dance. So the point I want to make here is that dance has a place in almost all fields. Dance has a place in social work. Dance has a place in health. Already dance has a place in tourism. Dance has a place in IT. Dance has a place in culture. Dance has a place in all these different sectors that seek to improve human condition.
Mm-hmm. I actually appreciate you saying that, because
Yeah.
I think people need to be more aware of it.
Yeah, I think what we need to do as people in the field of dance is to reorient our thinking. For quite a number of years, we have restricted our practice to the conventional stage, which is good because that is the base.
Mm-hmm.
That is the foundation. So we need to have technical skills, we need to have knowledge, we need to know how to be out there, so the foundation, the conventional practices give us that. Then the question becomes, how can we use our skills and knowledge in applied contexts?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is where we need to challenge ourselves. If I'm a good dancer, choreograph, etc., and I'm successful on stage, how can I transfer my knowledge and skills and apply them, for example, in youth development, in areas of health, in different embodied therapies, for example? And I think there is an opportunity for us to go into all these fields. And also, for a number of years, they think a dance is about the body and you just move and go home. And so the more we break these boundaries and go into these fields and serve them, the more we will be appreciated out there as people who can have a positive contribution towards things that seek to change the human condition. I think we just need to go and then be out there and take these chances. Otherwise, dance has a lot of knowledge that can apply across the board.
What are some of the restrictions in your country at the moment, and how has collaboration had to change based on the restrictions that you all are faced with?
As dancers, you're restricted in movement because you always operate in different spaces. So you just don't go to one studio. You go to a studio, then you teach at a school, then you choreograph from another school, and then you go and pick costume from somewhere. That's how we really operate. So the ability to move, to be mobile, wider distances, it was limited, number one. Number two, the ability to go into a studio, a space that is sacred, a space that is so spiritual to us as dancers, was really restricted. So you had to create something at home and figure out how to. It was so difficult to look at that as a sacred, my living room as a sacred kind of place. It's a sacred place in a different kind of perspective. Not really, in the dance studio kind of perspective. So you realize that, and then you realize it's a shared space as well. So as you really stand in front of your computer to teach a class, someone is, you have seen all these kinds of incidents, the Zoom incidents, YouTube live, Instagram live incidents, etc. So you're always on the edge. You don't know whether something is going to happen, and then people on the other side will go, "Oh, what's going on?" You had that kind of restriction. Then you had a restriction in the fact that ours is more a social activity. So we meet our audiences, we meet our dancers, we meet our fellow collaborators, composers, etc. So you had that restriction. Teaching is the same kind of story. So I think across the board, we had these kinds of restrictions. Yeah, and I think in my country, like in Uganda, you realize that different countries have different privileges.
Exactly.
Access to space, access to internet. So in my country, there's also the restriction of not even having enough data, or sometimes you wake up and things are so slow. You can't do anything.
Yikes.
So there are different really limitations that are different communities faced, and still face, to be very honest with you.
Yeah. Patrice, it's so funny when he said that, because I remember when I went to South Africa and I was training some coaches in South Africa, but we are just so used to sending YouTube links, and you assume that people will have the data to be able to look at the YouTube. And I remember they used to tell me, can you not send YouTube? Can you actually send the file instead of sending the YouTube link? Because our data is limited. And it's interesting because we take for granted that the situation where we are in terms of internet connectivity and access to data and stuff is what people face in other places. Actually,
it's a privilege. I'm telling you, internet is a privilege, space is a privilege. And let me tell you something, it's a privilege to so many people. And it's the thing that we need as dancers to function, space, time, body. And so it was interesting.
Your latest book, I believe, is called Ubuntu as a Dance Pedagogy in Uganda.
Yes, please. It just came out 2020, so people go out there and get some. It's a wonderful book. It landed on Amazon, so you can get it.
Okay, great. So I was curious, what exactly is Ubuntu? Because the only Ubuntu I know is the operating system from Linux. I don't know in terms of dance. What is
they
Ubuntu?
always go for our names, our words, etc. Safari, and then someone will tell you the only Safari that I know is that Apple thing, and the only Ubuntu I know is the OS. So Ubuntu is more or less philosophy around which thinking of Black people is organized. So it's really, it has been popularized in Southern Africa in terms of literature, in terms of theorization, in terms of research. But it's a philosophy that defines and is defined by Black people, and Black with capital B. So Ubuntu philosophy comes from what I call interhumanness. In fact, it was really summarized by the great African philosopher John Mbiti from Kenya, who said, Ubuntu is I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. A person is a person because of other people. Omuntu ngumuntu. ngabantu. I think that's how the Zulus, phrase it. In Buganda, we say omuntu kulwabantu. That's the Baganda people of Uganda, the community to which I belong. So this idea is really the opposite of the Western idea of individualism. So Ubuntu looks at how people see themselves as a community, but at the same time, within that community, there is room for individuals to grow, to innovate, to contribute, to belong, to be included, etc. It's the interplay between the individual, what I call individuality, and communality or the community. Now, Ubuntu talks about that spirit of communitarianism, but it doesn't really mean that there is unanimity within the community. So it really doesn't seek conformity to the community. It seeks that sense of recognition that others have contribution to make. That is the Ubuntu summarized. Of course, the way it is interpreted in law, in religion, peace and conflict studies, in community development, medicine, etc., and in different communities across the African continent may have some particularities, but the underlying foundation is that I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. And I think the world needs that now more than ever before, especially with the crisis within the liberal thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. LaShaun, you had a question.
So we first heard about you on Ken Brody's webinar on the viability of dance. And I was telling Patrice at that time that I was just so absolutely amazed by everything that you've done and your work and everything. I think a lot of people, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, they see dance as just as an extracurricular activity. Because I also teach at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and a lot of parents question what kind of career can my child have if they, pursue dance. And like for you, you were just like the prime ultimate example of being able to take, you have a PhD and you're in the field of dance. I just found it was a great example that I would love to use to my students as well, to say, no, you can take dance straight up to this, academic level. And I was curious to know what sort of advice would you give to parents who question wanting their children to go into a career in dance?
I think to the parents out there, the world is shifting. Actually, I think when I joined dance, and it was a struggle. My story was also, it's not that they just let me go into the field.
Please share. I would love to hear.
So yeah, the children out there who are struggling with their parents, their communities, you realize that it's you against the whole village, and sometimes the whole tribe. So it's you against everybody else. And because they don't believe that dance should be something, the world needs to take seriously. So for me, I come from a big family, so doctors and lawyers and engineers, and we also have a Catholic priest in there. And so that tells you, my two parents were teachers who really wanted their children to go into the traditional prestigious professions, law, mass comm, public admin, etc. And I was headed for law. Yeah, I was headed for law, having failed and my dream of becoming a Catholic priest. So I pivoted and started chasing the dream of becoming a lawyer, which I worked really hard at school, middle school, high school. I was a very, very prolific debater. And then things changed when I was joining college, because I was admitted for performing arts, particularly dance, when I wanted to go for law, etc. And so at that point, my father especially was like, maybe you need to go into teaching. And so he kind of slowly started preparing me, although he was meeting some very serious, quiet resistance, because I thought, no, I didn't want to go into teaching. And so I had a scholarship to do dance, a government scholarship, which really means you study for free. They give you an allowance. Yeah, but something in me was like, now private is risky because you're paying. What if you don't really have money? What happens? So I was like, why don't you take this government opportunity and then see what happens and maybe change, pivot back to law. So that's how I end up studying dance, and I try to change. Actually, I tried to change and go back and study human rights and find my way back into law. And at that point, when I got a university job to teach dance because I was good at it. I was good at the things that I decided to pursue. When I pursue something and I think it's a lesson out there, you got to be good at it. Yeah, you really, really don't go halfway.
Yeah.
Even in dance, when I reached campus, another story was we are allowed to change courses. So me and we're only 8 boys in the dance program, and we are the pioneers of the dance program. So they selected us, and we're only boys. All of us wanted to leave, apart from one
Wow.
who had come through the performance kind of background. So for them, they were there for the passion. And all of us were rejected. So we never granted change of course. And so we stayed. And we were like, you know what? We don't have any other getaway. We can't run away. Let's just do this thing. And so that's how I started dance and succeeded. And then within that study, so something that really intrigued me, I've always been a post-colonialist. I think around the age of 8 or 9 is when I was like, but why did they colonize us? And then around the age of 11, I read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's play, The Death of Dedan Kimathi. And I was like, why did they kill Dedan Kimathi? And you know, Dedan Kimathi was a freedom fighter in Kenya who was killed, more or less like the Steve Biko story, arrested and then died in prison at the hands of the colonial masters. So I've always wanted to kind of push back a little bit. And then, so when I was reading history, they said they banned dances and music first. I was like, why did they ban music and, cultural dances? So when I learn in dance, I see it firsthand. I really, really started dancing in a society that despised me. So the colonial mentality had penetrated us as well. And so I was like, if I'm to push back against colonialism, I have to be in dance. This is the field where I have to be. This is the right portrait of any kind of fight back.
Right.
And to do that, I have to succeed at it. So that's how I really stick around. That is the drive. It's the post-colonialist in me. So that's how I really escaped in dance. But then going to the parents, number one, the world is changing. The more you allow children to go into those fields that tickle their creativity, their innovative capacities, like dance, like other fields, the better. And these fields are dynamic, meaning that it's very possible for someone who chooses to pursue those fields to reinvent themselves depending on the trends. But people in the creative economy, which is now huge, employs a lot of people in the whole world, start a career, pursue a career, grow a career, and succeed. That's what I would like to just share with parents out there. And others can come and, pursue different directions and still make it.
Well, thank you for that. I'll make sure my parents listen to this podcast so they could hear that. Any closing comments before we go from anyone?
I'm so glad that Patrice, I'm so glad that you invited me here because listening to your story was so inspiring. Like, I love your story. I love your work, the work that you've done, even speaking about the way that you spoke about the role that dance has in different sectors, in the social sector, in the health sector. And it's true, I think the pandemic really kind of brought that even more to light because you would see a lot of people that can't go and take part in all these sporting activities that they usually do, and they turn to dance online as a way of, trying to maintain their physical ability. They've turned to a lot of online dance and entertainment to deal with their psychological issues and their depression and anxiety that they're facing during the pandemic time. So I don't know, I love hearing you speak, and I'm really glad that I was able to be a part of this. So thank you.
Thank you, LaShaun. I think for me, my closing remarks just argue that and request dancers out there, all people in the fields that are closely associated with dance, to think about that question of always reinventing the self. That means that we need to build, all you, the dancer, all you, the person in the dance field, you need to always build the skill sets that we need. Basic writing, grant writing, project proposal writing is very important. Just going into communities, this networking and telling ourselves is very, very important for us. Then ability to read and understand the trends going on, not only in the field of dance, but within the political economy, locally and globally, is very important. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know the trends and what's going on, because at the end of the day, we operate within that environment. Number two, to just go out there and think about ourselves beyond the stage and ask the question, how can I apply my knowledge and skills in the different sectors? In fact, I would just pose this question to you out there in dance and the field associated with dance. Write this down and then always think about it. How do I apply my skill sets and knowledge base in other sectors or disciplines within the local and global economy? And as you try to find answers to the questions, or if you find answers to that question, then you need to move to put those answers in practice. And that means networking, that means being out there to sell ourselves, that means seeking collaborations, and so on and so forth. That is so, so important. And then lastly, always support each other. Competition is good because it's the mother of innovation, but collaboration is also one of the playgrounds that produce very wonderful ideas. So let's also collaborate locally, let's collaborate
globally,
internationally, and globally.
Okay. Well, thank you, Doctor, so much for taking the time to be here. Sorry to make you wake up this early in the morning.
Oh, that's me. Yeah, I'm always up by that time.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Great. And of course, thank you to my co-host, LaShaun. Always a pleasure.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Patrice. Thank you, LaShaun. It's my pleasure, and I look forward to more conversations and more topics that touch dance and non-dance things. Thank you for listening to the Corner Show Panda. Follow us on Twitter at Corner Show Pan and Instagram at the Conpan. Today's episode featured me, Alfdaniels Mabingo, and you can find me on social media at Amabingo on Instagram. Music used in this podcast was originally composed by Richard Pargass, and you can find him on YouTube at Richard Pargass. This podcast is hosted by Patrice, Rostón, and you can find her on Instagram and Twitter at Patrice Rostón. Today's co-host was LaShaun Prescott, and you can find her on Instagram and Twitter at LaShaun Prescott.